I thought you might find it helpful if you're thinking of attending the program I run, which is entitled Advanced Negotiations on M&A. And in particular, who should really attend this? What are you going to gain? What are you going to get out of it? How is it going to help you in your career? So the way I think about this program, it's sort of divided into two different segments, if you like. The first bit deals with the soft sort of negotiation aspects of M&A. Anyone who's a practitioner at M&A knows that the market is really divided into very large deals, which are process-driven. I'm not really focused in this initial section on that. I'm really focused more on the deals where you can actually sit down and negotiate the term sheet, the SPA. So those are probably going to be at the smaller end of the spectrum. Anyone who has done M&A will know there's no one-size-fits-all in terms of the negotiating techniques that you can use. But what I will do is try to give you a template of the sort of negotiating techniques you can use and where to use them. So, for example, I think that one of the often overlooked aspects of M&A is the importance of the term sheet. It gives you, I think, a huge amount of insight into what's going on the other side. You learn how sophisticated they are. Other sort of key things that give you heads up about what's coming down the track when you start really delving into the really sort of deep issues of what is working capital, net debt, all of those kinds of things. So that's really what I'm trying to do in the first section, is just deal with those you might call soft skills, but it isn't soft skills in the sort of way you might imagine. It's much more tied into the practicalities of the M&A process. The second part of the program really focuses on the hardcore issues, things like cash-free, debt-free. And one of the things that many practitioners, I think it's very easy to overlook this, is that M&A valuation is actually quite different to valuation in a standard case. So, for example, items like cash and debt and indeed working capital have a completely different meaning in the M&A context. So, for example, surplus cash, trapped cash, operational cash. Operational cash doesn't appear in the working capital at all. It's just assumed. So these are sort of key issues I look in the cash-free, debt-free. What is debt? Not that straightforward either. If you look at something like deferred revenue, that could be debt, could be working capital. So what I'm going to be doing in that section, dealing on what we call the equity bridge, just talking through those, plus some other esoteric items like minority interests. How do you value those? Pref shares as well. These are all things that are not that straightforward. After that, we start looking at different processes involved in M&A. So that's going to be completion accounts and lockbox. It's true that obviously completion accounts are less used today than they were some years ago. And we've seen certainly in Europe a rise in lockbox. But there are nevertheless key aspects in that are relevant also to lockbox. For example, which set of accounts are you using? So I'll be talking about how to think about that because that is a pretty critical thing, bearing in mind that you're giving a warranty on that. Lockbox has become much, much more prevalent in the last 10, 15, 20 years since I've been doing M&A. I think it started about 2006. And the key sort of issues there is there's a key difference between theory and practice. So things like the value accrual, for example. Some people use an interest charge, which is historically what you were meant to do. But then there are other ways of using tickers and all sorts of different tickers. So I'll be talking through how you use those and also more challenging instances where, for example, the company is loss-making. How do you deal with that? So that's one of the aspects that I'll be looking at in the lockbox. The other side is going to be the leakage. How do you deal with that? And we'll discuss how leakage should be addressed. So that really deals with those aspects. The next part of the course really looks to some extent on the warranties. And I look at this from both a UK common law perspective and indeed a civil law perspective. I don't really delve into it in great detail, but just enough so that people understand the key sort of aspects and things to look out for in, when you're negotiating, when you're looking at an SPA. We then sort of turn our attention to look at things like the earnouts. I've done about 25 earnouts, and I have quite specific views on how those ought to be handled and how parties should really protect themselves. So what I'll be doing is sharing my experiences gained over a long time about, how to focus on it, how to mitigate the risks. And hopefully by the end of that, you're going to have a pretty good idea about each little bit of the process. So some of the accounting, the equity bridge, some of the legal aspects, and then finally the aspects dealing with the earnouts. And so I hope that, by the end of the course, you're going to have a pretty good idea of each of those. If you want to drill down into other aspects of it, particularly the SPA, or maybe just the accounting, financial issues, I have other courses on those that we can, you can have a look at too. But I think this is what this course will do.